I was never the daughter they wanted. I wasn't graceful like Emily, or charming at dinners, or good for bragging. I was the one they barely acknowledged until I became their shame. My father once stared straight into my eyes and said, "You are a disgrace to this family." And everyone else just kept eating. No one stood up for me. Not even my mother. Not even once. But they had no idea what I really did for a living. They had no idea I'd been watching them watching him. So when his boss, the mayor, walked into our home that night and froze the second he saw me, my father finally understood. I wasn't the disgrace. I was the reckoning. My name is Alexis Moore, and this is what it looks like when the girl they tried to erase becomes the one who ends it all. Before I share my story, I'd love to know you are here with me and listening to me. Comment listening below or tell me where you're from. I love hearing how far my story reach. Sometimes, knowing someone is there makes all the difference. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. I've never really belonged anywhere but nowhere more clearly than in my own family. My name's Alexis Moore. I'm 33. I live alone in a quiet neighborhood 3 towns over from the one I grew up in. My place is small, simple, silent, and mine. It's the only space in the world that doesn't ask me to pretend. That doesn't look at me like I'm something broken to fix. Which is probably why I hesitated the moment my phone buzzed that morning. It wasn't a call. It never is. Just a message from my sister, as cold and clipped as ever. 6 p.m. tonight. Don't be late. Wear something decent. No, hi. No, how are you? No, we hope you'll come. Just another performance I was expected to attend, without applause, without lines, and definitely without a seat at the main table. Last year, I skipped it. They called me ungrateful. The year before, I came and was seated with the caterer's kids and a cousin's toddler who spilled juice on my lap. My mother had barely looked at me. My father shook my hand like I was a client. My sister had laughed and said, "At least you made it this time?" I spent that whole night wondering why I bothered. But here I was again, standing in my kitchen, holding my phone like it might burn me. Maybe it already had. I turned it over in my hand, flipped it face down. I stared at the small pile of mail on the table and remembered every single party they'd hosted. The way I was always either invisible or inconvenient. The way my mother once said, "Try a little lipstick next time, Alexis. You look tired." The way my father introduced me to his colleagues. Alexis is our older daughter. She's into government work, something like that. Then he'd light up when he spoke of Emily, like she was carved from starlight. I opened the drawer beside the fridge, took out a small plastic square no one in that house would ever recognize. I slipped it into a plain envelope, sealed it, and tapped it twice before tucking it into my coat pocket. Not for them. For someone else. For something else. A detail in a bigger story they didn't know I was writing. Then I looked at myself in the mirror, flat black slacks, gray blouse, low ponytail, bare lips, no mascara. They'd call it plain. I call it armor. I'm not their little girl anymore. I'm not anyone's anymore. And this time, I wasn't going to that house for them. I was going to end something I should have buried years ago. Their house hadn't changed. Still 2 grand staircases curving like arms that never reached for me. Still that baby grand piano nobody ever played except for that one time Emily posed beside it in a sequined gown for her graduation party. Still that massive photo of her, larger than life, from Yale, hung over the mantel like a crown jewel. I stood in the foyer for exactly 3 seconds before the housekeeper noticed me. "Oh, Miss Alexis," she said, surprised. Like I was a ghost, she wasn't sure could still walk through walls. My mother passed by seconds later, barking directions to the staff about the seating chart. When her eyes flicked over to me, she nodded, sharp and brief. Then turned away without stopping. I knew the drill. I slipped off my coat and scanned the room. Guests were already gathering in clusters, champagne flutes in hand, the familiar scent of polished wood and catered appetizers clinging to the air. My father stood near the fireplace, laughing a little too loud. He wore a new navy suit, tailored and sharp. I hadn't seen him in nearly 9 months. When his gaze met mine, something in his posture stiffened, but only for a beat. Then he leaned toward a man beside him and muttered, "That's Alexis, my oldest. She does something in local government, I think." Then louder, like a switch flipped. "But my Emily, now she's got a real head for strategy. PR firm in Boston, already on track to be partner." And just like that, I disappeared again. Emily floated into the room minutes later, all effortless elegance, burgundy heels, perfectly tied silk scarf, hair pinned in a sleek updo. She spotted me, offered a small wave that felt more like a warning than a greeting, then made her way over. Her eyes dropped to my feet. "Still rocking the orthopedic chic, I see," she said, nodding at my flat black shoes. "Still commenting on things that aren't yours?" I answered, without looking at her. She smiled, but there was bite behind it. "It's a family thing." I didn't reply. I just drifted to the dining area, already knowing where I'd end up. And there it was, my name scrawled on a place card at the auxiliary table near the hallway. Not quite with the kids, not quite with the help. Just close enough to hear the laughter from the main room and feel exactly how far away I was. A boy across from me, maybe 10 years old, looked up and asked, "What do you do?" I smiled. "A little bit of everything." A guest from the main table leaned back toward my father. "Is that your daughter too?" "Yes, the older one," he said. "Not quite like Emily. She's more introspective, doesn't care much for ambition." I excused myself before the dessert plates came out. Not because I was hurt. I'd stopped bleeding from that wound years ago, but because I felt my phone vibrate twice in my pocket. Maximum. One of my team members. Not someone my family knew existed. Not someone they'd ever think I'd be in contact with during a party. Signal confirmed. Wire transfer from Shell account tied to Clean Start Foundation. Signatory, Donnelly. Co-signatory, Gregory Moore. My father. The name didn't surprise me, but seeing it in black and white, attached to one of our red-flagged charities, tightened something in my chest I couldn't loosen. A moment later, my mother called out, "Alexis, dear, could you grab a few more bottles from the car? The wine's running low." I nodded and stepped out. But on the way back through the hallway, I passed the office. The door was slightly ajar. I didn't mean to stop, but I did. Inside, my father stood with his back to me, phone to his ear. "I told you. Donnelly said it's clean. The funds are washed through the education initiative. It's airtight. No one's looking." My lungs froze. I stepped back before he could see me. He had no idea who was looking, or that she'd been listening all along. No one noticed when I left. There was no goodbye from my mother, no glance from my father, and certainly no farewell hug from Emily. I slipped out the side door as dessert was being served and didn't bother looking back. I walked down the driveway under the canopy of string lights they'd hung for ambiance and stepped into the dark like I'd done it 1,000 times before. The farther I got from that house, the easier it became to breathe again. My apartment was cold and silent when I got back, just how I liked it. No piano, no fake smiles, just me, my gray walls, and a locked drawer filled with truths. I poured myself a glass of water, sat at my desk, and opened the laptop. The screen came to life instantly, revealing encrypted folders and real names attached to real crimes. Inside those files were details no one at that party would dare imagine: 3 education grants approved over a span of 6 months, all supposedly benefiting underserved districts, all funneled through a charity called New Future. All of them passed with the signature of Charles Donnelly, Mayor. All of them backed by a secondary name, Gregory Moore, my father. The transfers didn't even try to be subtle. Shell companies linked to construction contracts that never existed. Fake invoices for school renovations that never took place. And the money? Cycled back through consulting fees and redirected into personal accounts in the Caymans, one of which now bore my father's initials. I closed the folder and leaned back in my chair. My pulse was steady, but my chest was tight. I'd built my life around truth, around chasing it, protecting it, defending it. But this was a different kind of line. This wasn't just some executive I'd never met. This wasn't a distant figure in a faraway district. This was my blood. My father. If I pushed forward, I wouldn't just destroy his career, I'd expose our entire family. I'd be the reason he lost everything. But if I backed off, I'd be complicit in defrauding an entire city. So I hit record on the small audio device I kept on my desk and spoke into it quietly. If you're hearing this, then maybe something went wrong. Maybe I disappeared. Or maybe I just need someone to know I chose this. I chose to follow it through, no matter the cost. Even if it meant burning the bridge to my own family. I paused, then shut off the recorder. Tomorrow, we'd finalize the packet for the U.S. Attorney's Office. Tomorrow, I'd receive the last missing puzzle piece that could justify a federal warrant. Tomorrow, there would be another party. Another toast to my father celebrating his nomination as Deputy Director of City Financial Planning. And Donnelly would be there. The architect of the fraud. The man who'd built a kingdom of lies from taxpayer money and backroom favors. I closed the laptop. Got up, walked to the bookshelf, tapped the underside of the third shelf, and a hidden compartment slid open. Inside was a matte black pistol issued to me 3 years ago for field protection. I didn't take it. I wasn't walking into war. Just a family dinner. Instead, I reached for the flash drive labeled NF-47 short for New Future File number 47 and my badge. I wasn't going there as a daughter. I was going as someone they never truly knew. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. My body was calm in the way that only comes before something irreversible. At sunrise, I was already downtown, walking through the back entrance of a warehouse with no signs, no names, just a keypad and a camera. This was our ground, our home field. A federal investigations task force built for one thing: following the money, even when it led to the highest rooms in the city. Max was already inside, sipping coffee like it was any other Tuesday. He handed me a folder without saying a word. Inside were 3 highlighted transactions, each one a direct deposit from a real city budget line to a company registered in New Jersey under an LLC owned by Olivia Donnelly, the mayor's wife. Each transaction listed the same project name: Urban Education Renewal Plan. But no work had ever been done, not a single brick laid, not a single permit pulled. Your father's name appears as secondary authorizer on all 3, Max said quietly. This isn't a coincidence. I stared at the paper for a long moment. Do we have enough? Max nodded. We've looped in DOJ. Takedown request goes to court at noon. If it clears, we serve by 8 p.m. Then Lena stepped in, eyes tight. We've got a problem. Donnelly's clearing out his office. Our guy at City Hall said he's shredded every internal memo, canceled meetings for the next 2 weeks. Someone tipped him off. I didn't ask who. I already knew it was coming from inside. Maybe from the same circle that raised toasts in my father's name. Then it came an email. No sender. Just a sentence. Stop digging, or they'll bury you. It came from an encrypted city server. I didn't tell anyone, didn't forward it, didn't panic. I just stared at it and whispered to myself, let them try. Because I knew there was only one place where both Donnelly and my father would be too exposed to hide, and I would be there too. My childhood home. The party. That night. I gave Max the nod. Call the marshal's unit. We do it tonight. We began prepping our containment crew plainclothes officers, a tight circle of vetted agents, no names shared. No one could know I was the one coordinating the takedown. I recorded the tactical plan into the secure drive and signed off with my badge ID. When I looked down, my hand was trembling. It wasn't fear. It was the weight of a decision I'd carried too long. Before I left, Max leaned in with something else. I need to tell you one more thing. There's chatter out of DC. They think Donnelly's not just skimming money. He might be tied to a federal-level leak. Top secret intel moving through his channels. I looked at him. How sure? Not sure enough to move yet. But if it's real, you're walking into a case that could classify you within national security ops. You'd get full federal protection, or lose everything and vanish off the books. I didn't blink. Doesn't change the plan. At 5:30 p.m., I stood outside the house I used to call home, holding a folder tucked inside my jacket. My badge felt heavier than usual. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was the ghost of the girl who used to live here waiting by the door, hoping her father might be proud of her for once. I stared at the porch light glowing softly in the dusk, then took a breath. I wasn't that girl anymore. I was the woman about to define what the Moore name would mean from now on. The moment I stepped through the front door, the room shifted, though no one knew why yet. I wasn't wearing a cocktail dress. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't pretending to blend in. I wore a fitted black blazer over a matte blouse, utility boots polished to the bone, hair pulled into a tight knot at the base of my neck. No makeup, no perfume, no performance. My mother caught sight of me as she walked by with a tray of flutes. Her brow twitched. "Why are you dressed like that?" she asked, half whispering, half embarrassed. I didn't respond. A few steps later, Emily appeared from behind the staircase in a floor-length ivory gown, her lips curved in that familiar smirk. "Not the local government look anymore?" she said, eyes glancing over my boots like they were a crime against family decorum. "Not exactly," I replied, voice flat, and walked past her. The house pulsed with warm light, catered aromas, the soft clinking of forks against plates, and a kind of forced laughter that had echoed in these walls my entire childhood. Guests moved through the parlor and into the dining area like silk being folded over silk. Every detail was curated: the wine labels, the floral centerpiece, the music so subtle it was meant to feel like air, and I stood in the middle of it, the only thing that didn't match. A black mark in a room full of gold. But I wasn't here to match. I was here to watch. My eyes scanned everything. My team had already arrived, dressed as valets, waitstaff, even neighbors. No one would recognize them. That was the point. One of them, Lena, passed by with a tray of hors d'oeuvres and nodded almost imperceptibly. All clear. Then, near the piano, I saw a woman I didn't recognize chatting intimately with my mother. Her voice low, posture confident, hand resting briefly on my mother's elbow. She wore a wine-colored dress and gold earrings that didn't match the understated aesthetic of the evening. I moved closer and caught just enough of her words. "Greg and I go way back. Yale days. Couldn't miss this moment. Foonhan Donnelly. She'd disguised herself well. Even her voice was softer, warmer than the last time I'd heard it through surveillance audio. But her presence here meant something more than I expected. This wasn't just political corruption. This was personal. A decades-deep collusion. The mayor's wife, hiding in plain sight, celebrating a man they'd helped elevate. Mid-speech, my father raised a glass. "What makes this city work," he said, "is trust. The kind of trust you build over time with good people who do the right thing, even when no one is watching." A few heads turned toward me, likely by accident. Or maybe not. I watched his jaw tighten as he continued. "Integrity isn't just policy, it's personal." Right then, my phone buzzed once in my pocket. It was Mac's change of plans. "Donnelly's arriving early. Someone tipped him off you're here. Called you a suspicious unknown presence." I stared at the screen. Suspicious unknown presence. In my own family home. Someone in this house had warned him. Someone had seen me and felt the need to sound the alarm, which meant, somewhere in this room, there was a traitor. And it could be anyone: my father, my mother, Emily. As I scanned the guests again, Emily suddenly appeared beside me, holding her phone. Her voice was softer than usual, almost careful. "Why are you really here?" I raised an eyebrow. "You've never asked me that before." She hesitated. "I got this earlier today." She turned her phone toward me. The message was simple. "Be careful with your sister. She's dangerous." She looked at me, for once without a sneer. "What are you involved in, Alexis?" I took the phone, scrolled, memorized the number. "You ever wonder who sent that?" I asked. "Or why they'd want you scared of me?" Before she could answer, a hush spread across the room. Donnelly had arrived. Like clockwork, the crowd parted for him. Suited, smiling, shaking hands. The perfect politician in tailored charcoal. I didn't move. I just watched him. His eyes danced from guest to guest until they landed on me. 1 second, 2. Then his entire face dropped. The blood drained, the smile slipped. His fingers clutched the stem of his wine glass so hard I heard the faintest crack. The room didn't notice, but I did. Then, just before I moved, my father was beside me. Not stern, not smug, but pale. His voice low, strained. "Don't ruin tonight, please. Just, not here, not now." It wasn't anger. It wasn't control. It was fear. Charles Donnelly didn't speak to me when he entered. He couldn't. The moment our eyes met, something ancient passed between us. Recognition. Not of names, but of roles. Predator and prey. But this time, the roles had reversed. He turned quickly, pretending not to see me, and immediately began mingling. He smiled at my father, shook hands with 2 council members, and made small talk about the city's budget. But I saw the way his thumb flicked open his phone behind his back. I watched him type something fast, discreet. 2 minutes later, Mac sent the update. Black SUV just pulled out of Olivia Donnelly's estate. Rear compartment appears to contain secured case, likely document storage, possibly evidence. They were trying to bury it. If we waited too long, every bank trace, every signed invoice could disappear into fire or encryption. But if we moved too soon before the warrant cleared, we could compromise everything. I checked the signal. Donnelly was still in the room. The team at the perimeter confirmed visual contact. We were still in play. From across the room, he turned to my father again. They laughed, smiled, talked about rebuilding trust with voters. Their heads tilted in that private angle of people who think they're above the storm. But I'd brought it with me. Then I saw him, the police chief, dressed like any other guest, standing near the wine station. He caught my gaze and walked over slowly. "Your lead tonight?" he asked softly, barely moving his lips. "Yes." He nodded. "Federal order received. I'm ready when you are." I reached inside my jacket, slipped the flash drive from its inner pocket, and handed it to him. "All the names, all the transfers. The judge's seal is embedded." He tucked it into his coat. Acknowledged. Then Emily found me again. Her face was tighter now, something between worry and confusion. "Alexis," she whispered, "what are you doing?" "Bringing something to an end. Dad just got nominated. You know that, right? This is the biggest moment of his career." I looked her dead in the eye. "Then it's the perfect time to make sure it's his last." And that was when I heard it. My father's voice, sharper than usual. "Alexis, come here, now." I turned. He stood by the main table, Donnelly at his side. His face was red, his eyes wide. I walked over slowly. "Whatever it is you're thinking of doing," he said under his breath, "you need to stop. You're going to destroy this family. Do you understand that?" I took a long look at him. The man who raised me. The man who introduced me as the quiet one, who called me a burden when I didn't fit their world. "No," I said clearly. "You did that yourself." And I turned away toward the truth, and everything it was about to shatter. The toast was midair. Charles Donnelly raised his glass and said something about legacy, about community, about standing tall through adversity. The guests laughed. Glasses clinked. My father nodded with his best political smile. Then came the voice that cut through it all, steady, clear, absolute. "Mayor Charles Donnelly," the police chief announced, stepping forward into the center of the room, his badge now visible against his suit. "By order of the United States District Court, you are under arrest for money laundering, embezzlement of public funds, and abuse of office." The music stopped. The laughter shattered. I heard a champagne flute hit the ground and splinter against the marble. My mother gasped and dropped her glass. Emily's face lost all color, her lips parted in shock. And my father? He didn't move. He just froze, like someone had pulled the power cord from his spine. Donnelly blinked. "There must be a mistake," he said, his voice a half-tone too high. This is outrageous." I stepped forward, pulling my badge from my coat. "There's no mistake." The police chief glanced at me and then gave a respectful dip of his head. "Ma'am." I saw the moment it registered in every guest's face, the ones who'd asked if I was still doing something with city permits, who thought I was the dull, awkward daughter who lived alone and never came to brunch. They watched as the chief called me ma'am and waited for my orders. "Secure all mobile devices," I instructed calmly. "I want a full sweep of hard drives and local backups. He doesn't leave with anything in his pocket." 2 agents moved in on Donnelly. He backed up a step, but didn't resist when they cuffed him. The click of the restraints echoed louder than the music ever had. From opposite corners of the room, more agents emerged through the front door, from the kitchen, even down the back hallway. My team, my operation, every detail I'd written over the last 6 months, now taking form under the chandeliers of my childhood home. But it wasn't over. I turned to the chief and gave a small nod. "There's one more," I said. Another man balding, wearing a navy blazer, pretending to blend in with the guests, was suddenly surrounded. One of our internal witnesses had pointed him out in advance. The city treasury handler who'd moved the money through shell accounts into a company owned by none other than Gregory Moore. My father. The man dropped his wine and tried to protest, but it was too late. The agents moved in, and within seconds his wrists were bound too. I turned toward my father, who had taken one small, trembling step backward. His face was white. "Con la I?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Your daughter," I said, "and the person who's been tracking you for the last 6 months." You could have heard a pin drop. Then Emily's voice broke through, thin and sharp. You're a cop? You're not a secretary or something? You're actually—" She didn't finish. I didn't answer. I stepped past her, up onto the first step of the staircase, and turned to face the room. These were the people who had laughed when I walked into rooms, who whispered about my plain clothes and quiet ways, who had written me off before I could speak. Now they watched me like I was holding a weapon. Not because I was dangerous, but because I finally mattered. And in their eyes, for the first time, I saw what fear looks like when it has no mask left to wear. They led Donnelly out the front door with cameras flashing in the driveway. A local reporter had already arrived, alerted by someone who had picked up the sudden shift in the city's power grid. My family's house, the same one that hosted Easter brunches and over-decorated Christmas parties, was now the backdrop of a federal takedown. The guests had scattered into small clusters, whispering, hiding their faces. The room that once buzzed with ego was now quiet with judgment. I stood still, centered among them, but separate from all of them. No one looked me in the eye. My mother sat down slowly on the velvet armchair, one hand gripping the armrest like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "Alexis," she said finally, voice cracked, "why didn't you tell us? Why now? Why tonight?" I didn't hesitate. "Because he came tonight," I said, "and I wanted you all to see who he really was and what he taught Dad to become." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just told the truth like it was oxygen, like it had waited all this time to finally breathe. A man stepped toward me from the back of the room, gray suit, city-issued ID badge barely visible under his coat. "I'm the city's legal counsel," he said quietly. "Donnelly isn't the only name on our radar. There's enough evidence to open a federal inquiry into your father's financial records as well." I met his eyes. "Then do it. If he's guilty, arrest him. If he's not, let him prove it. That's how the system works." He nodded and stepped away. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a disappointment in this house. I felt like gravity. The room was still. But it wasn't the kind of stillness that follows dismissal. It was the silence of something shifting. No one made a joke. No one offered a clever dig. The air had changed. And me? I didn't need applause. I didn't want validation. I just wanted it all out in the light. Emily stood a few feet away, still holding her untouched glass of wine. Her face was unreadable. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice didn't sound angry, just lost. I didn't answer. I walked past her, through the open doorway and into the cool evening, where the lights from the squad cars washed over the front lawn like theater floodlights. I closed my eyes, and for the first time, I wasn't carrying the weight of what they thought I was. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't hoping. I was just me. No apologies, no bows. Only truth, and everything it took to bring it here. The next morning, I walked into the federal office with no fanfare, no flowers, no congratulations, just the same dull hum of printers, muted voices down the hallway, and the soft click of my boots against the tile. I stepped into the operations room, and instead of applause, I got what I valued most: acknowledging eyes, firm nods, a thick folder waiting on my desk. My supervisor slid it toward me without saying a word. Inside, a formal request from the Department of Justice to expand the Donnelly investigation across 4 municipal zones. The focus? Tracking illicit funds that had bled into housing initiatives, charter school grants, and health budgets for public children's programs. And flagged in bold under persons of interest was one name I knew better than my own: Gregory Moore. I read each page slowly, methodically. The same handwriting that once signed my permission slips had signed off on invoices that moved taxpayer dollars into shell nonprofits. My father, who once took the TV remote from my hands and said, "Violence has no place in our home," had approved financial transfers that left actual children without clean cafeterias or working heaters. The next morning, the court issued a formal suspension of his duties. It hit the papers by lunch. The headline read like a gut punch. Father of federal agent who brought down Donnelly now under investigation for financial collusion. I didn't respond to the calls or texts. Most were reporters. The others were people I hadn't heard from in years, suddenly remembering my name because it was printed in bold font beneath a mugshot. Later that night, a letter arrived at the office, no return address, but I knew the handwriting before I unfolded the page. My mother's. There was no apology, no plea, just one sentence. You chose justice over family. I hope you never regret it. I stared at the ink for a moment, then burned the page in the sink by the break room. Not out of spite, but because I finally understood. She would never see what I did as loyalty. She would never understand that I was the only one in that house who hadn't betrayed anyone. Emily made her move next. She posted a long captioned photo on social media, a black and white shot of her at the dinner table from the night of the arrest. The caption read, "There is no deeper pain than being betrayed by someone who shares your blood." Thousands of likes, hundreds of sympathetic comments. Not one person asked what it cost me to be the one holding the match. I sat in my office that night and pulled up a voice file. It was the one I'd recorded weeks before, the night I finalized the raid orders. I pressed play. My own voice came through. Steady. I don't need to win. I just need to not bow. That was it. That was everything. Later that evening, one of the junior analysts knocked on my door. "You have a fax," she said, a little awkwardly. It was a letter, real letterhead, real signature from the city police chief. The same man who'd called me ma'am in front of my family while snapping cuffs onto the mayor. He wrote, "You reminded me tonight that no name, no legacy, and no bloodline is worth protecting if it means letting the public suffer. Thank you for not looking away." After everyone left, I climbed the stairs to the rooftop above our field unit. I stood there alone, overlooking the quiet heartbeat of the city below. No lights, no clinking glasses, no father to scold me, no mother to sigh, no sister to smirk. Just the sky, just me, and the quiet that finally didn't hurt. 3 weeks later, Donnelly was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. Wire fraud, conspiracy, abuse of office, and of course the cover-up that made it all sing. His lawyer tried for a reduced term. The judge didn't blink. My father was spared a criminal trial. Lack of direct evidence, they said. No clear paper trail, no confession. But he was dismissed from his post, banned from ever holding public office again. I didn't attend his hearing, but I received a message 2 days after. "If you can live with the cost of this, then you no longer have a father." I didn't reply. I'd already lost him a long time ago. He just hadn't said it out loud until now. Weeks passed. My name was still on the news, still used in headlines. The agent who took down her father's world. Some tried to twist it into a cautionary tale. Others called it heroism. I ignored all of it. Then, one morning, I stopped at a quiet corner cafe in a part of the city no one knew I'd moved to. I was paying for my coffee when a man mid-50s, plain gray coat approached my table. "You're Alexis Moore, right?" he asked. I looked up, unsure if I should nod. He didn't wait. "I worked in the public schools budget office. I was one of the employees laid off when the education funds were redirected." I stayed silent. He smiled, gentle, not bitter. "We've been reinstated, full back pay. Some of us thought we'd never work again. What you did? It mattered." Then he simply nodded. No selfie, no handshake, no flash. Just walked out into the street, disappearing into the quiet. I sat there, stunned. And for the first time in years, I felt a pulse of something soft rising behind my ribs. Not pride, not glory, just warmth. The house I grew up in? I never went back. My room was cleared out. My name erased from the family chat group. My mother never called. Emily never wrote. And that silence? It no longer scared me. It set me free. I live somewhere new now. Clean air. No reminders. Not because I'm hiding, but because starting over deserves space. And because truth shouldn't have to live in the same place it was once punished. One afternoon, I was asked to speak at a conference titled Women and Justice. The host's voice rang out. Please welcome Special Agent Alexis Moore. Once rejected by her own family, she now stands as a symbol of what it means to choose integrity, even when you stand alone. I walked onto the stage. There were no familiar faces in the crowd. No mother, no sister, no applause from people who used to love me. And still I spoke. Honor doesn't come from blood. It comes from what you do when no one else claps for you. It comes from the choices you make when you're the only one left standing. And from never, ever bowing to the wrong thing. As I stepped off the stage, a girl, maybe 9, maybe 10, ran up to me. "Are you really a cop?" she asked, wide-eyed. I crouched down, smiled. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who isn't afraid of the truth." And that's what I carried with me as I walked out the door. Not a family name, not a badge, just that truth. And that was enough. That's all I have for now. Thank you for sitting with me through this story. If you've ever stood in a room full of people and still felt completely alone, if you've ever had to choose between being loyal to others and being true to yourself, if you've ever been told you weren't enough and still kept going anyway, or maybe you haven't lived this exact story, but you recognize the ache of it. You understand how heavy silence can feel. You understand how brave it is just to speak up. If any part of this resonates with you, just comment yes below. That one word yes can be your way of saying, I see you, I've been there, or I understand. Sometimes the first step to healing isn't fixing everything. It's simply naming what hurt us and realizing we're not the only ones who felt it. So feel free to share your story, or don't. Just know this is a space for you to be heard, to feel less alone, or simply to breathe. I'll be here. We'll be here. And maybe, just maybe, that's the beginning of something better. Until next time, take care of your heart. And remember, even if the road is lonely, you're still walking forward. That counts.